is thanks to the present day 2nd to the 77th and Colonel Snyder that's sitting down here, and the troops that came here, thanks for your service. One thing we did for you is we put a little decoration on your uniform. Second thing I want to do is thank Joe for this hotel here because they have the memory foam mattresses. I spent a couple hours on that mattress this afternoon and remembered a whole lot of things that I didn't. And I want to say to the rest of you, to you vets of the Battle of Suoi Tre, whatever your tie with it was, thanks for your service. It doesn't occupy much space in the history book, but for the armed forces of the United States, as Walt Schulart said earlier, it demonstrates that cohesion and teamwork and understanding how to fight, which is what we're all about, can carry the day. In many ways you say, why the Battle of Suoi Tre? Well, we don't know the answer to that question. And I realize this is a serious meeting, and I don't want to let you think that I don't take it seriously, but it reminds me of a story. I'm from Minnesota, and most of my jokes were about Scandinavians, and many of them about Sven and Ole. And when I was nominated to be chairman of the Joint Chiefs, I got a call from a wonderful clergyman friend who said that previous Joint Chiefs chairman had gotten into serious trouble by telling ethnic stories about living ethnic groups. And he urged me to stop telling Scandinavian stories. And he thought perhaps Hittite stories would work out better. The Hittites, having reached the height of their civilization about 1450 BC and passed from the earth about 700 BC. So I took to Hittite stories, and this story is about two Hittites named Sven and Ole. Who went to take the Minnesota truck driver's exam. And Minnesota has a three-part truck driver's exam. It has a written exam, an oral exam, and then a practical driving exam. Sven and Ole both passed the written exam, and they went in for the oral exam. And Sven went first. And the examiner said, you have 15 tons of steel on your rig, and you're traveling down a wet, slippery spring highway at the legal speed limit of 55 miles an hour, and you come up over the brow of a hill and you look down at about a 20% grade, and at the bottom of the hill there's a railroad crossing with the train stopped there on the crossing. And you test your brakes and nothing happens. What do you do? And Sven thought for a minute or two, and then he said, well, he said he reached over and jabbed Olive at my elbow and wake him up. and the examiner said, why do you do that? He said, well, Ole told me only last week that he ain't never seen a really big accident before. And I want to tell you that nearly 50 years after the Battle of Suoi Tre, and having looked at all sorts of reports, and having personally met the commander on the other side, I have come to the conclusion that the Battle of Suoi Tre was a big accident. That is, that the commanders on each side expected it to turn out differently than it turned out. On our side, we don't know what Colonel Garth knew. I suspect that Garth had some orders based on special intelligence. And in those days, special intelligence, which is basically stuff picked up by radio intercept and evaluated by the NSA or the Army Security Agency, was very closely held. And unless it didn't make any difference what security clearance you had, unless you had a need to know, you didn't get the information. Because later, some of you will remember General Heinkes came to the position the day after Suoi Tre and said, "Isn't it remarkable that we knew this was going to happen?" Well, none of the rest of us knew it was going to happen. And the same thing when I talked, as many of you know, I was the negotiator with the Vietnamese on the issues of POW, MIA, and getting the former South Vietnamese military leaders and political leaders out of the prison camps, and getting the separated Vietnamese families reunited, and getting the Amerasian kids out of Viet Nam and into this country. But anyway, it was a job that when President Reagan asked me to take it on, he said, "I think it'll take you about 3 months." Well, 6 years later, I told Bill Clinton I had actually completed everything I had been asked to do. So it was a little more complicated. But in the very last trip I made to Hanoi, I was introduced at the morning session to a new Vice Minister of Defense of Viet Nam. And he sat next to me at lunch. And he said, "You don't know me, but I know you." And I thought that was probably because I had been in and out of Hanoi going on 6 years by that time. And I sort of nodded my head. And then he said, "You were the commander at the Battle of Suoi Tre. I was the commander of the opposing force with the duty to destroy you that day." And he was the commander of the 9th Division. So we're not sure exactly what our commanders had in mind having us in that place, but I'm sure it wasn't to get into the fight we got into. And this guy had orders to destroy us, and he found out that he bit off something a lot bigger than he could chew. Because, as you know, we inflicted serious casualties on that outfit. So it helps straighten things out a little bit. Where I keep seeing in the history that it was the 272nd Regiment. Well, the 272nd was part of the 9th Division, but we identified soldiers from 6 different battalions in those that we buried that day. So even at the time, we knew it had to be more than the 272nd. And when you get the commander of the 9th Division saying that he committed his entire division to the destruction of that LZ, then you know a little bit about what the odds were and what the two commands had in mind. But a group of soldiers, airmen, changed things for him. And many of you that changed them are sitting here today. And I thank you for your efforts. And certainly he changed things, whatever our commanders had in mind. We certainly didn't change the war, the outcome of the war in Vietnam one whit with that battle, but we did demonstrate the great competence of the United States Army supported by the Air Force. You've heard all the details. I say I remember a lot of details. Just one detail I want to remember because Walt Shugart mentioned it. I took command of the 2nd to the 77th a few days before the fight, and the 25th Division had a stand to SOP. 2 hours before the beginning of morning nautical twilight, everybody was supposed to be up in their foxhole with their flak vest on. You could be in your skivvies if you wanted to, but you had to have your flak vest on and your ammunition belt and your musket in your hands and your helmet on your head and looking out toward where you might expect the enemy to come from. And I want to say that the 2nd to the 77th was a little sloppy on that, the day that I arrived, so we had some special instruction every day. And on this particular day, I got up at 2 hours before BMNT and went out to check. And I'm pleased to say the message had gotten out. Everybody was out there, a few of them in their skivvies, but they all had their muskets in their hands and their helmets on their heads and their flak vests on and their ammunition belt on. So they were ready when those mortars began to come down. As soon as the mortars stopped, I went out to, thought I'd better check and see what had happened to our perimeter because of the mortar fire, and I met Captain Cartwright, who was the B Battery commander, and he had Sergeant First Class Ray Childress with him, who was the chief of firing battery of B Battery, and his first sergeant. So we agreed that Cartwright and the first sergeant would go in one direction, and Childress and I would go in the other direction. Well, we got down to where the number 6 cannon was, and it turns out that number 6 had provided the B Battery portion to the counterattack force, so it was unmanned. There were 2 soldiers there. And we looked out and we could see the enemy coming in great numbers. And Childress and I got these other 2 soldiers to help us. We had some M79 grenade launchers, and what we did is use those grenade launchers. We thought they'd work pretty well, and it wasn't long before we realized we were in a bigger fight than we could handle, and by that time some of Shugart's B Company folks were falling back into our position and taking up firing positions. And that's when the beehive business started. And someday I'll tell you the story about Ray Childress, but a wonderful, great soldier who was wounded seriously that day, but eventually came back and finished a career in the Army. But at any rate, you've heard more than you want to hear from me, and I can't say thank you enough for what you did that day. We had some great fighters who actually knew how to fight and did it right. Thanks.
Rest in peace, great soldiers.
Please join me in your faith tradition as I pray in mine. Almighty God, today we humbly gather before you to remember all those who have joined in that sacrifice for peace and justice. We give thanks for the bravery of men and women who have served for harmony and love in times of war. As we bring remembrance to the heroic actions and ultimate sacrifices paid at the Battle of Suoi Tre, I ask that you bring peace to all here in attendance, and may the souls of those departed remain forever bathed in the light of your peace and love. Lord, we pray that hope overcomes despair, that joy overcomes sorrow, that peace overcomes hostility, that love overcomes hate. Lord, we lift our hearts to you and continue to remember the service of all of our veterans, to hope for an end to all wars, and that love may conquer all. Amen.
Amen.
General Retired Vessey, veterans of the Battle of Suoi Tre, Command Sergeant Major and Mrs. Sparger, distinguished guests, Mount Warrior soldiers, good morning, and thank you for gathering here today as we celebrate our Vietnam veterans and mark the anniversary of the Battle of Suoi Tre. To our veterans, I must start by telling you that you honor us with your presence today. It is both humbling for us and inspiring for us that you allow us to take part in your remembrance of the sacrifice and courage witnessed at LZ Gold. As your current commander of the 2nd Battalion, 77th Field Artillery, Steel Warriors, I'm honored to provide a few brief remarks of appreciation to our Vietnam veterans on behalf of all current Steel soldiers. This is meaningful to me personally because I'm a military family member. Both my grandfather and my father served in Vietnam with you. And as amazing as it may seem, I do remember the very small number of Vietnam veterans that were still on active duty when I joined the active duty force. And I can tell you from personal experience interacting with our soldiers today that your service and your sacrifice continues to inspire us all. In some ways, your lives after Vietnam have had an equally powerful impact on our current generation. Throughout the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, we've been blessed with tremendous support from the American people. Soldiers today receive unconditional support while deployed, and we receive a warm welcome when we get home. We have no doubt that our families are supported by the community and that the nation supports us, and our nation recognizes the significance of our service. Our generation needs to understand what it was like for you to return from the fight and to remember that today's unparalleled support is a result of your experience, your sacrifices, and your commitment to get it right for us. You didn't return to combat to communities with open arms, to parades or heartfelt salutes that we now receive. Your spouses didn't have access to reliable communications with you while you were overseas, and you didn't have family readiness groups like we have today to provide assistance to the families at home. Today's soldiers and spouses benefit from your advocacy, and they embrace the values of selfless service, patriotism, and valor that you set for us during Vietnam. Thank you for being here today to share your experience with us. So we say to you today, welcome home. While today's ceremony is significant in that we're able to express our appreciation to you, we are primarily here to honor the following. So veterans, there's no way that I could possibly equal the recounting of the battle that happened last night. But if you'll indulge me, I feel that I must speak to it a little bit more so that we can properly educate today's soldiers on what you went through. 48 years ago this week, long before many of these soldiers were born, the artillerymen of 277 and their brothers from 322 air assaulted onto Gold in support of Junction City 2. Though not initially contested, the fight rose to a peak in the early hours of 21 March. At 6:30 on the morning of the 21st, enemy mortars began to rain. We estimate over 650 mortars fell as the NVA and the Viet Cong advanced. Within 30 minutes, American artillery and air assets were brought in to defend the quickly deteriorating lines. By 08:30, maneuver elements had collapsed back to 277's gun positions while the enemy moved to within hand grenade range. The gunners began firing beehive direct fire and HE rounds to repel the enemy charge. This was the first ever combat employment of the beehive round. At 0900, the relief column from 212 Infantry broke through the enemy and linked up with the depleted troops of Bravo 322. With the reinforcements and new firepower, the two units were able to repel the counterattack to the east and reestablish the original perimeter. By 10:45, it was over, minus the pursuit of fleeing NVA and Viet Cong. The Americans counted over 600 enemy dead, while over 30 Americans made the ultimate sacrifice, with nearly 200 more wounded. For the unit's collective valor on 21 March, the 277 was awarded the Presidential Unit Citation, which hangs from our colors today, signed by President Johnson on the 23rd of September 1968. This is representative of the Valorous Award for every single soldier in the fight. For the artillerymen of steel present today, your valor and actions on 21 March provide our lineage. The puck hangs here, and we continue to remember the fire support lessons of Suoi Tre. Our 277 gunners, like Joe Engel, remind us that direct fire matters. The gunship pilots from the 118th and the 145th remind us to manage our airspace and to conduct flexible air-ground integration attacks. Our supporting artillery from countless other batteries remind us that overlapping counter-battery coverage is a lifesaver. And most importantly, the grunts here today remind us gunners that we must train to fight like infantry off the guns. The infantry may need us to save them in the forward line. Today's soldiers, we remember your lessons, we uphold your values, and you cannot imagine the immense sense of responsibility that we feel to carry on your legacy. Thank you for your example and your presence today. You honor us. Steel, strength, and respect, led by love of country, Mountain Warrior.
General Retired Vessey, veterans of the Battle of Suoi Tre, Command Sergeant Major and Mrs. Sparger, friends and family of the Lethal Warriors and Steel Warriors. Thank you for attending today's memorial ceremony commemorating the heroics and sacrifices made by the men of the 2nd Battalion, 77th Field Artillery, 22nd Infantry Regiment, 2nd Battalion, 12th Infantry Regiment, and 2nd Battalion, 34th Armor. For the Suoi Tre veterans who made the journey to Colorado Springs this weekend, you honor us with your presence here today. And just so you know, the weather like this is always, it's always like this in Colorado, so please feel free to come back and visit. In the early morning hours of 21 March 1967, Fire Support Base Gould awoke to 60 millimeter and 82 millimeter mortars falling on the company and battalion command posts. A short time later, Viet Cong machine gun fire and recoilless rifle fire began pounding the perimeter of the American position. This barrage was followed shortly by waves of Viet Cong infantry attacking from the dense vegetation surrounding the fire base. In the infantry captain's career course, we learned about the echelonment of fires. The Viet Cong exercised this technique expertly that day. It is clear from the reports that the 272nd Regiment of the 9th Viet Cong Division were well-trained, well-equipped, well-led, and a disciplined enemy force intent on destroying the small American enclave near Suoi Tre. Had it not been for the heroism, valor, dedication, and hard-nosed fighting of American artillerymen and infantrymen, the enemy may well have succeeded in its goals. Within 5 hours of the enemy taking Fire Support Base Gould under contact, 647 Viet Cong soldiers lay dead on the battlefield. Their attack defeated, and the remnants of the NVA regiment pursued through the dense vegetation by reinforcing American units. The soldiers of the 2nd Battalion, 77th Field Artillery, 3rd Battalion, 22nd Infantry paid a heavy price for this defeat and well-planned attack. 36 American soldiers made the ultimate sacrifice, and 190 soldiers were wounded during the battle. Though separated by 48 years, the bloodlines of today's Steel Warriors and Lethal Warriors are clearly drawn from these Suoi Tre veterans. Whether fighting on the streets of Baghdad, in the Korangal, Pesh, Wegal, or water-poor valleys of Kunar Province, the great burrows and mountains of Zabul Province, or the deserts of Spin Boldak, today's mountain warriors exhibit the same grit, indomitable fighting spirit, and brotherhood exhibited at Fire Support Base Gould. Though the majority of today's lethal warriors were not born in 1967, a shared bond which transcends time exists between soldiers who have a shared experience of combat, have shed blood on foreign soil, and grieved for fallen comrades. Today we celebrate that common bond with those men who came before us. We honor the heroism displayed at Suoi Tre, and we mourn the sacrifices of our fallen. As we gather today with the veterans of Suoi Tre, the Lethal Warriors stand ready to fight alongside our Steel Warrior brothers, just as we did 48 years ago. Strength and respect, led by Love Country.
I'd like to first ask that all Suoi Tre veterans please rise. We're going to be talking to our brothers. Brothers, we're here for you this morning. But just as you know, we are here for you every morning. We also know that you hear us when we speak. Today is that date on which we have vowed and promised, either alone or together, to salute your bravery, to honor your heroism, and to reflect upon the greatest of all sacrifices which each of you so heroically made that morning. When we reflect back 48 years ago this morning, when that March dawn was shattered and living hell touched down in LZ Gold, and it brought with it the worst humanity had to offer, we would find ourselves participating in extraordinary death, destruction, and violence. There were things that we would encounter, see, and live with that morning that we would never have imagined. That morning, we would never imagine that our incredibly brave brothers, our Alpha Gator and Bravo Regular, would be overcome and face what they had to face just on our perimeter. That morning, we had no idea that those Whispering Death Quad 50s would be taken down. Or that our 105s, 18 of them, would start dropping like dominoes. There were a lot of things that we lived with because of that. But brothers, you know that we live in your honor. For as much as we may have given, you gave more. We know that when, at the same time we were there, that our Vietnam War, which is our war, was becoming less and less popular. But that was not our concern. We know that those back-to-back operations that found us out there all the time, that also was really not our concern. Because we were soldiers. And it was our job, duty, responsibility, and supreme effort to face, engage, overcome, and destroy the enemy with all the resources we had available. And that's what we did. And while that may have been what we did, that's not why we fought. Because we all know that we fought for ourselves and our brothers shoulder to shoulder next to us. That is why we fought. And now, brothers, the time has come to speak your names to the winds. For in the winds, your names live forever. James P. Barton, 68th Assault Helicopter Company, Top Tiger, number 5. Thomas J. Dando, Bravo, 3rd of 22nd Infantry. Marlon C. Eversgerd, Bravo Company, 3rd, 22nd Infantry. Jack M. Gossel, Bravo Company, 3rd of 22nd Infantry. Robert L. Lynn, Bravo Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. Paul J. McGowan, Bravo Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. Fred H. Pedersen, Bravo Company, 3rd of 22nd Infantry. Louis Sauce, Headquarters, 3rd of 22nd Infantry. Donald L. Schroeder, Bravo Company, 3rd, 22nd Infantry. John H. Sheffield, 68th Assault Helicopter Company, Top Tiger, number 5. Gilbert N. Smith, 68th Assault Helicopter Company, Top Tiger, number 5. Donald W. Walters, Bravo Company, 3rd, 22nd Infantry. Johnny L. Washburn, 118th Assault Helicopter Company, Thunderbird. Rodney R. Weed, Bravo Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. Edward Matthew D'Amato, Alpha Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. Herman Andrews Jr., Bravo Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. Matthew David Atkins, III, Bravo Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. Norman L. Balance, III, Headquarters Battery, 277 Artillery. Michael Allen Belzer, Alpha Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. Larry Dean Barton, Alpha Company, 2nd of the 12th Infantry. Thomas Lynn Bell, Headquarters Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. Kenneth Gene Landon, Bravo Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. James Dale Brewer, Alpha Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. Joseph Don DeLandro, Alpha Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. James C. Dixon, Headquarters Battery, 277 Artillery. Jackie Alpha Battery, 277 Artillery. Tony L. England, 7th Air Force, Forward Air Control. Michael Ferenza, Headquarters Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. Walter Forbes, 7th Air Force, Forward Air Control. Brian Francis Gibbons, Bravo Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. Charles Ray Goodwin, Headquarters Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. Willie Grant Jr., Charlie Battery, 2nd, 77th Artillery. Edward Harding, Alpha Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. Jimmy C. Carter, Bravo Company, 3rd 22nd Infantry. John Oliver Harris, Headquarters Company, 3rd 22nd Infantry. Bravo Raymond Hines, Bravo Company, 3rd 22nd Infantry. Virgil Madison Ledford, Bravo Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. William Arrow Mallory, Headquarters Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. Alan S. McCann, Alpha Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. Edward Jerry Mueller, Bravo Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. Garland A. Newhouse, Bravo Battery, 2nd of the 77th Artillery. Thomas D. Patterson, Alpha Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. John Francis Bazzillo, Alpha Company, 2nd of the 77th Artillery. Lawrence E. Paddock, Bravo Battery, 2nd of the 77th Artillery. David Clyde Rogers, Charlie Battery, 2nd of the 77th Artillery. Jesse D. Rose, D Battery, 71st Artillery, Quad 50s. Thomas M. Siklecki, Alpha Battery, 2nd and 77th Artillery. Robert Joe Smith, Headquarters, 2nd and 77th Artillery. Thomas Talmadge, Alpha Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry. Algernon Paul Thomas, Bravo Battery, 2nd and 77th Artillery. Larry Lyman Warnock, Bravo Company, 3rd of the 22nd Infantry.
did some years ago. And it had something to do with old Ole. You remember that song? The song about Ole getting his. You ready? It's going. Joe, we need you up here, Ole. Yeah. He's the guy favor of the timepiece when they got lost their job?
Okay, so, Joe, we haven't known each other for very long. It's okay, can y'all hear me in the back? Everybody? Mike. Okay. How about now? Loud enough for the artilleryman in the room? Okay. Hey, you know, Joe, we haven't known each other for very long, but I can tell you that you've really pulled the heartstrings for everybody that's here. And so, from our professional organization, the Field Artillery, we're going to give you a small award tonight. This is the highest award that we give within the Field Artillery, normally reserved as the culminating award for a career of service to the Field Artillery.
To all field artillerymen, wherever ye may be, greetings. Know ye that there appeared before a most arduous and selected committee composed of highly esteemed and proven field artillerymen a likely candidate for the Honorable Order of the St. Barbara. Be it remembered that the hereinafter mentioned individual has been inspected and passed on by ourselves and our loyal staff, and be it known by all ye field artillerymen who may be honored by this individual's presence that Mr. Joseph Ingalls, having been tried and found worthy to be numbered as one of our trusty members, has been gathered to our fold and duly initiated into the solemn mysteries of this traditional brotherhood of stone hurlers, archers, catapulters, rocketeers, and gunners. Be it further understood that we hereby confer upon this individual the shield of St. Barbara, emblazoned above and enjoin all field artillerymen henceforth to show due honor and respect whenever this individual may enter their midst. Given under our hand this 23rd day of March 2015. Signed, Neil N. Snyder, Lieutenant Colonel, Field Artillery Commander. Okay, now as is tradition, when we do our St. Barbara's Awards, the awardees and the command doesn't charge. So at this time, gunners, stand by. Fire!
Is it working? When I was a commander of the 4th Division, we used to have these ceremonies, and the public address system was very important. And I charged the signal officer with making sure it worked. So I had a little fish line snare that was attached to his body parts. I told him if there were any squealing on the public address system, he knew what was going to happen. There isn't anything left to say, to tell you the truth. You know, Joe has just been made a member of the Order of St. Barbara, and I think that's very important, and I want to add my thanks to Joe for the wonderful work that he's done and all the people who have assisted him in getting this put together. The ceremony today out at Fort Carson was I don't know how the rest of you felt, but it was terrific. And I looked at those soldiers of today, and I can see that they're bigger, they're taller, they're probably smarter than we were, and we can be proud as citizens that they are in fact protecting us. And I want to say thanks to the commanders of the 2nd of the 12th and the 2nd of the 77th for that wonderful ceremony today. You know, we've had show and tell, and as you may realize, that my son and daughter-in-law live in the local area, and they do a television show for the Denver Public TV. I think it's called On the Road Again, or Hitting the Road. Anyway, they insisted that I bring a trinket. At that particular time, my son was, in the day of Suoi Tre, he was 10 years old and had sent me a letter saying, please take some battlefield photos. So I contracted with whoever it was in the outfit that did the work with the PX to get a camera. And I got a late model Pentax camera. And on the 21st of March, I had it sitting on the edge of my foxhole. And after the fight was over, I thought, boy, I can take some pictures. And I brought the camera here tonight. I have given it to David, but if you look carefully, you can see where the bullet hole. So I don't know what this Pentax cost me, but I didn't get a shot with it. Anyway, I want to add sort of one serious note. The issue of the war in Viet Nam has been debated many times about whether or not it was worth it and whether or not anything good was done. Some of you may know in the last years of that war, I was supposed to be in charge of the American contribution to the war in Laos. And after the 1962 agreement, we weren't supposed to have any military people in Laos, so I was there in civilian clothes. But at any rate, we had a pretty good war going on there, too. And about when I was chairman of the Joint Chiefs, I made an official visit to Thailand as a guest of the commander of the Royal Thai Armed Forces. And he took me on a tour of the armed forces of Thailand. His name was Kriangsak Chomanan, and he had been in charge of the training of the so-called Thai volunteers that fought in Laos on our side. But anyway, we went to a veterans project near Chiang Mai up in northern Laos, or northern Thailand. And by this time, this veterans project was successful. And it was similar to one that our own country organized after World War I. Anyway, they had become farmers, and they were growing strawberries for the tourist hotels in Chiang Mai and sending them to Bangkok as well. And we walked into this project area where the veterans' housing was. And the first fellow that we saw was a guy that had been an artilleryman, a second lieutenant, forward observer in a battle that we had on the Bolivans Plateau in the last days of the war. He'd lost a leg there. And I had visited his position about 2 hours before the North Vietnamese attack. And I don't know to this day whether Kriang Sat set this up or whether it was really an accidental meeting. But anyway, this ex-artilleryman greeted me, saw me and greeted me, and he said there were a bunch of the other Thai volunteers there in the project who would be delighted to see me and shake hands and so forth, and said he could arrange that. So we had lunch, and afterward we had a gathering in a room about this size and about the same number of people, and there were veterans of the war in Laos, Thai veterans, and a fellow who had been an infantry battalion commander became the spokesman for the group. And he got up and said that he wanted to thank me in behalf of my role in the United States, and thanking the United States itself, and to thank me personally for what my small contribution. But, and then he pointed out, he said, we're sorry that Laos fell to the communists in 1975. But he said, we weren't fighting for Laos, we were fighting for Thailand. And he said, he reminded me that the ground on which we were standing was occupied by communist guerrillas in the days of the war and before the war. And he said, our country is now united. We're members of ASEAN. We trade freely with Viet Nam, with Cambodia, Singapore, the Philippines. And he said, we send our strawberries to Bangkok over roads that the U.S. Army engineers built to haul bombs. And they send fish up here for us to eat. And he said, the world is a better place because you in the United States challenged the communist efforts to turn Southeast Asia into a communist bloc. Well, by the time he got done, I had tears as big as road apples running down my cheeks, and realized that my view of the war and our own results and how we viewed it was much narrower than it should be. That in fact, if one looked out at the rest of the world, and particularly that part of the world was far better off for what happened. And it has made my night times a little better than they were before, just remembering that that is in fact the case. So it was not for naught that those fights took place. I want to say again, thanks to all of you, Battle of Suoi Tre, for what you did that day, but also for getting together here today. And to say thanks again to those of you in today's armed forces for the remarkable job you're doing under very difficult circumstances. Thanks to all.